When did you realize that you were hanging out with the wrong crowd? I had a buddy in high school that told me he had thrown a party at an empty rental property and had left some stuff there the night before. He asked me to help him retrieve it so that they wouldn't get busted. We got over to the house and he goes into the backyard. He slides one of the side windows open and climbs in. After a few minutes of rummaging around, he starts handing me things through the window. A radio, DVD player, some DVDs, among other things. At that moment, it dawned on me we were robbing this place. I set everything down on the ground and without a word got in my car and drove off. Apparently, he panicked when he noticed I was gone and thought we'd been caught. Supposedly, he took off out the back door and jumped the fence. He knew I wasn't into that kind of stuff, so he never really gave me any crap for that. Prior to this, there were some warning signs about his lifestyle. I had an old, small pickup truck with a sliding back window. He taught me how to jimmy it open with a screwdriver and use the antenna to fish my keys out when I locked them in there. Saved my butt on more than one occasion. When I hadn't been invited to see any of them in 3 months, I was always initiating contact, and they all hung out without me practically every day without ever inviting me. My husband did the same thing. One day he stopped texting people and wanted to see how long it would be until they texted him. The answer was never. This hits home for me. I'm going through the very same thing right now with a group that I've been pretty close with for years. All of a sudden, I see things pop up on Facebook about the hangouts and stuff that they're having, and different things that they're all doing together. Everyone is linked but me. I even made it a point to mention it to the guy that usually organizes everything that I would like to be included in next time. 2 days later, and they were all out having dinner for one of the guy's birthdays. No invite. That stuff hurts. The same guy that organizes everything will just send texts just to say hi to me, but nothing ever comes of it if I try to get something set up to chill. I don't think I'm very far from dropping it entirely. No one wants to be the guy that feels like he has to beg just to hang out. They didn't like one guy they used to hang out with, so they peed in his soda one after the other. When I fully realized I was hanging around with a group of people that didn't just identify with vampires or romanticize vampires, but actually believed they were vampires. In my day, it was girls who dressed like Stevie Nicks and thought they might be a witch. Oh, we had plenty of those too. One in particular stopped speaking to me after she insisted she could control fire with her mind, and I helpfully pointed out how her mystical gestures were creating a draft. Look, as someone who was in the drama class club at school, I may or may not have been involved with some of these people, short and long term. It's generally okay as long as you talk to them one at a time and not in a group when they start to get really into it together. When I was at school, I hung around with 2 guys who, in hindsight, were real buttholes. They always got me into trouble, and I never made any effort to stop them or actually see the light, so to speak. More fool me. Anyway, there was this other guy, who I'll call Jeff, and we picked on him a bit. For anything, really. His hair, shoes, whatever. Fast forward a few months, and I'm sitting in a music class. I'd fallen out of grace with the 2 friends I used to spend most of my time with, and the tables had turned. They were throwing crap at me in class, calling me names, threatening to fight me, among other things, the usual stuff. Some might say this was karma, and now I certainly agree. And then, the most unexpected thing happens. Jeff turns around to these absolute nonces and says to them, "Why the frick don't you just leave him alone?" As you can imagine, I was completely taken by surprise. So much that after the class, I pulled him to one side and asked him why he stuck up for me. He basically said that he didn't like people being singled out and isolated from others for no reason, even though this was exactly what I did to him. He became my best friend after that and has stayed as much for the past 12 or so years. I like to think he also helped make me a better person by setting this example. We don't live so close anymore, but recently I got a house with a spare room, so I think a visit is on the cards. When my friend, whose butt I was injecting roids into, called me to threaten me because he was paranoid that I'd told the cops he was dealing substances, I stopped talking to that whole crowd afterwards. Mine failed to pay rent because they spent it all on substances. I had one roomie that couldn't pay rent because she spent it all on substances as well. She pawned a bunch of my stuff, games, CDs, jewelry, while I was at work and gave that money to me to pay rent. After reading through these others, my story of disagreeing with one friend and getting isolated by the rest of the group feels sort of lame. They kept talking crap about people. Not just people we knew, but strangers that walked past in the street as well. I just realized at one point that I didn't give a crap if someone was wearing an ugly scarf or whatever it was that really bothered them at that moment. When they Drano-bombed the house of a girl on the spectrum, I didn't go and there was no serious damage to the house, but police got involved and there were huge consequences. This was in middle school and the poor girl was scared and humiliated, didn't come back to school for weeks. After that, I looked at who I was hanging out with and decided to seek better friends. I'm just glad I didn't take part in it. It was 15 years ago and I'd still feel guilty about it. Two friends in high school that I once spent a lot of time with started trespassing on a property in town where the owners were away for months at a time. Finally, they broke in and started going all through this furnished home, taking stuff and just using it for fun. When they told me what they were doing, I distanced myself from both of them, and was glad to do so. When I realized I dealt with 90% less drama while not hanging out with them. In defense of being friends with those people, it does make the dramaless moments all the better when you have something to compare it to, so they really did you a solid. When they started making fun of a young lad who'd been beaten up by his girlfriend. When me and my friend got jumped and I got on the phone for the cops as soon as I got free. When the attackers saw my phone come out, they ran for it. The next day, my friend started spreading rumors that I left him to the attackers. I got an ambulance for him and everything. He took pride in constantly belittling me and turning people on me, so that was pretty much the last straw for me. Oh, and I just remembered an even worse story. Different friend, same friend group, but there was a girl in the group that this guy was trying to impress, so he thought the best way to do this was to hold a butcher's knife to my throat and periodically throw knives at me and the guy from story 1. Needless to say, it didn't really work. When my friends of 10 years said to me, "Stop fricking following us," I cried afterwards. The same thing happened to me in middle school. A girl I was good friends with all year, we visited each other's houses and everything, just turned around one day and told me to stop following her. Then, like 5 years later, she tried to sleep with my boyfriend. F you, Cassie. When I watched a guy basically judo toss a cop, that cop was only trying to break up a fight the guy started over someone else apparently looking at him wrong. They were friendly and apparently mature people, with families and insofar as we could all see, an honest means of livelihood. I got introduced to their siblings, family, and it all seemed well. Until that moment. One of them began to narrate how great his life was as a hoodlum and a gangster, and how he enjoyed destroying properties, beating up people, and how great it felt as people used to get visibly scared of him as he walked the streets back then. Its climax was that he had murdered a guy in cold blood just because he was trying to defend his property from the guy. That was just the icebreaker. Another guy jumped in and boasted of how many people he had killed. When someone asked him the proof, he calmly went in and brought back a file. All his arrest and jail records. And that's your cue to exit right there. And if that's the stuff they were talking about in front of the family and siblings, what's the stuff they were holding back on? Were they secretly shoveling puppies into a furnace in their free time? One night I was invited to hang out at a party of co-workers after work. Shortly after I got there, the co-worker got into a big verbal fight with his girlfriend, and then pulled out a piece and started waving it around. Suddenly, I had to go to the bathroom, which was fortunately by the door. I noped out of there. In the long run, nobody got shot, but I never hung out with them again. One night, me and several of my then friends brought a quarter of the most powerful magic fungi I'd ever experienced. We went out to this empty summer camp to eat them. It was fall, so the camp was pretty much abandoned. We were all tripping hard as frick outside for an hour or two before it started to get cold. We decided to all get in my car for a bit and turn the heat on. So here the four of us are, sitting in my car, tripping like heck. At this point, friend A spits a loogie into his hand, stares at it for about 5 minutes, and then turns to friend B and screams, "You motherfricker!" snatches the keys out of my ignition and runs into the woods. And that was the last time we saw friend A that evening. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to fast forward through the part about us having no idea what happened to him, starting a search party, friend A's father coming to the camp and taking my license plate number, me having to break into my parents' house at 2 a.m. to steal their copy of my car keys. I got the car in high school, they still had theirs. We finally got the car out of the woods and back to my place and part ways. When I woke up that morning, I found out the police had taken my car while I slept. It turns out that when friend A hocked up that loogie, he thought it was splooge. He then turned to friend B sitting next to him and assumed that friend B had made him suck his eggplant. He took my keys and ran into the woods, called his parents and told him what he'd just done to friend B. They took him to the hospital and called the police. When they ran tests on the loogie and found out it wasn't what he thought it was, nothing actually happened. The police dropped everything, but not before luminol and blacklighting my whole car. Talked to a friend whose father was working in the hospital that night, and it turns out friend A had armed police officers outside his hospital room because he was convinced that friend B was going to come back and make him finish the job. There's so much more to the story that I left out to avoid creating a wall of text. Apparently, friend A still to this day believes that he did that, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary, and gets really defensive when you tell him it didn't happen. It's like an integral part of his identity now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I noticed that saying really intimate and personal things made me feel vulnerable and foolish and didn't get much of a response from my friends. I grew up with the wrong people, and to be honest, I enjoyed most of it, but I realized about 3 years ago when my daughter was born that it wasn't the lifestyle for me. I hope this is still relevant, because I'd like to share my story. I grew up at the football stadium in Italy, and at 14 years old I started hanging out with a bad group of ultras, extremely dedicated fans which you find all across Europe for those who don't know. My parents would give me money to buy tickets and go on the coach to away matches, but they didn't know just how drunk I would get and exactly what kind of things I did. By 17 years old, I was already taking white snow and taking part in organized fights almost every single week. It was a high like you can't even imagine. We'd sing, drink, take substances on the coach, and when we got there, we'd get into fights with the local police or other fans. My specific group contained about 35 to 50 people who filled out every color of the hate group rainbow. I remember when I was 20 years old, I threw a flare at a man on the way to the stadium and it hit him in the face. I don't know how that ended for him, but we ran away after that incident. I was arrested 4 times in total, and I was given 6-month bans from all stadiums in Italy on 2 occasions. Anyway, when I was 24, my girlfriend remained pregnant, and I still didn't stop going, even though she asked me to. I finally realized what I was doing wasn't fair for her, when maybe around 1 month before she gave birth, I was almost arrested again with my friend, and he was carrying a knife with him. After that, I stopped going. I still watched my team on TV, but I haven't been to the stadium since then, even though some of my friends still text me and call me to go with them, even just to see the match. I know most of them are still involved in that stuff. I'm 27 now, and I have a 3-year-old daughter who I hope never finds out about the stuff her dad used to be into. When I was approached about joining them for lines of white snow in the 7th grade. Oh my god, what kind of 7th grader can even afford that? I mean, I'm half joking, but half not. When I was in a room full of people and I felt completely isolated and alone for some reason. When I was being arrested and I watched my friend drive off in my car. We were cashing washed checks and I caught up inside the bank. As the police officer was walking me outside, I saw my friend driving away. Not that I expected her to get out and incriminate herself, but it was definitely a moment of realization. Seeing the car leave the parking lot while the cuffs were being put on was powerful. None of them put money on my books, I only got a couple of visits. After all that loyalty and no snitching crap, they forgot about me. When I got out of jail, they couldn't even pick me up because they, my crew, had been using my car the whole time for who knows what, and nobody wanted to put gas in it. In the end, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Most of the old group is in jail, homeless, or worse. I've since moved on to become quite successful after breaking my connection with those idiots. I saw one of the main ones of our stupid operation at the homeless shelter about 2 or 3 months ago. I believe I received lessons I needed from that group and then got arrested at the right time to avoid the sharp downfall that everyone else went through. There was this girl in school that I had a crush on. I asked her if she wanted to go out with me, but she said no. She ended up dating this other guy who was a complete turd and pushed me around. A few years later, she ended up marrying the guy. I was so frustrated and ended up joining this gang, basically, that really hated the guy she married. So I thought, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. A little while later, though, the leader went completely berserk and broke into their house and killed both of them. Their son actually survived though. I still haven't left that gang yet, but I'm going to soon. I just want to make sure their kid is safe. I've been able to keep an eye on him because he goes to this school for wizards that I teach potions at. You're in witness protection, Harry. Well, folks, he got me. I was officially in rapt fascination and formulating a completely different line of commentary right up until the last line of that story. Damn you, author, and thank you for making me laugh. When I realized I had nobody I could call to help me immediately after I was the victim of the unspeakable act and stuck with the perpetrator. After I got clean, I realized my friends had only been substance buddies. When they laughed at me for attending university while they were smoking their doobies and waving beer bottles. Skateboarding would be such a cool hobby if the people doing it weren't such a bunch of losers. That's my experience with it anyway. When I moved because of a job, I didn't know, and still don't, know anyone here. I found an awesome cement park, but when I try to make small talk and they find out that I work in IT and have a career and stability, they act like I'm the epitome of a cop-loving, fun-hating corporate sellout. I like to party and have fun, but I also like not being homeless and starving, and I really like the appeal of a six-figure salary and my future. Where are you at? I'll skate with you. When my ex was in the hospital and everyone was too busy to drive me to see her, I realized the wording may confuse some people. She was admitted to the ER because she had almost fainted or had fainted. I get a text from her saying that she was going to the hospital. That was the text, no details other than that. That's when I called people. There was a tight-knit group of people I'd started hanging out with in high school. We started hanging out outside of school when they invited me to, well, what turned out to be a mass makeout session. It was this weird kissing menage with people swapping partners and kissing in groups. None of them were dating each other. They acted like it was the most natural thing. Oh, you have to go? That's a shame. Everyone give him a goodbye kiss. When I saw my friend chase after someone with a pocket knife in his hand. I'd known Juan ever since I was in kindergarten, and we were really close growing up. We had sleepovers pretty much every weekend, and he joined me for my family camping trips every summer. I was an only child, and he was like a brother to me. Then a bunch of us were transferred out of our grade school by our parents to the 6th grade because they were unhappy with the admin and felt we could learn better elsewhere. Even though I lived on the south side of Chicago, I ended up in a school on the north side with another friend of mine, Manny, while Juan ended up going to a school closer to his house. Juan and I still hung out sometimes, but we started drifting apart more and more. I could tell his new school was changing him, and by 8th grade he was part of a local crew. At the time, I was really into graffiti and rap, so even though things were changing, we still found out we had things in common. The last time I saw him, I was at his graduation party. After the whole family thing was over, we were hanging out with some of his friends from the neighborhood to smoke some green herb. Then Juan and I decided to go for a walk. I had a backpack full of spray paint, so we went up to the train tracks by his house to hit up some trains and walls. I put up my name and he put up his gang's tags. As we were bombing this one wall, we hear a voice from below. There's this guy yelling up at us. I don't remember what he said, but it drove Juan crazy. I'd never seen him like this before. He was like a completely different person. He started running after this guy, and out of instinct, I just followed him. The other guy bolted and he chased after him, and I chased after Juan. After a few minutes, he lost him and stopped, and I was finally able to catch up to him. He still had that crazy, angry look in his eye, but I also noticed he had a knife in his hand. It was then that I knew I didn't belong there. He started talking about getting a couple of other people to find this guy. Apparently they had some beef with him, which is why he was so angry. I convinced him to let it go for now and go back and smoke some more green herb to chill out. We did, and I crashed at his house, just as I'd done for so many years. But after that night, I wanted nothing to do with the lifestyle he was getting involved in, and even though we still talked on the phone sometimes, we never hung out again that summer. After we started high school, we lost touch completely. I still thought of him a lot and wondered what happened to him, so I'd Google him sometimes, but never had any results. It wasn't until last year I finally found him when I used his middle name in my search. There were about 6 or 7 different mugshots from his various visits to county jail, mostly on possession charges. It made me sad, but at the same time I was glad I didn't go down the same path. I hung out with the wrong crowd during my freshman year in college, mainly because we were from the same high school. All they ever cared about was talking about other people behind their backs. It was a bad breakup to say the least, but I was happy with the friends I eventually got in the succeeding years. Honestly, reading all this stuff, I figured out I am that friend. I mean, I'm not going to throw a Drano bomb into an autistic girl's house, but I'm that friend that just gives out green herb to friends, and I only promote laziness and lethargy. I don't grow and I influence them to not grow either. Thank you for making this post. I need to do some thinking on my life. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.